Player development is at the heart of pretty much all of the most successful franchises in the league. Drafting good players that can exceed their value is one of the most important foundations of a team looking for long-term success, but bringing those players into the team and getting the most out of their talent is an entirely different process. Teams all have different goals, and sometimes the focus on winning now results in longer-term prospect development projects being pushed aside, and they can give up on players too early sometimes. This brings us to the topic of today's video, where we'll be discussing 5 players in particular that recently have been playing some amazing basketball, and their former teams have got to be kicking themselves for giving up on them at a price well below their value. Before we start though, it turns out about 65% of you watching right now aren't even subscribed to the channel, so please, if you enjoy the content, consider hitting the subscribe button, as not only does it help out a ton, but I would also very much appreciate it. Now with that being said, let's begin. The first player we'll be discussing today that is now thriving is the current leader of the 6th Man of the Year race, being Jordan Clarkson of the Utah Jazz. Clarkson's career to this point has already been one where he made a name for himself by exceeding all expectations from where he was drafted, being a 2nd-round pick, to then becoming a solid bench scoring option that could create his own offense off the dribble. But once that original excitement about him being a diamond in the rough wore off, the flaws in his game started to get exposed a little bit. He was always capable of having explosive scoring nights, but he was a very streaky player to say the least, and his efficiency as a scorer has trended towards below average more often than not in seasons. He started out with the Lakers, and then the Cavaliers acquired him for a finals push. That was the last year that the Cavaliers did make the finals during LeBron's reign over the Eastern Conference, but Clarkson's showing in that postseason was disastrous. He averaged fewer than 5 points per game in that playoff run, which definitely left a sour taste in the organization's mouth. The next year, he would end up getting traded to the Utah Jazz in exchange for Dante Exum and 2 second-round picks, and looking back at that deal, I don't think there's any denying how hard the Jazz fleeced them. The Cavaliers took a chance on Exum, who was previously a lottery pick but could never stay healthy, and unfortunately that's still been the case. Meanwhile, Clarkson this year is averaging a career-high 18 points per game, he's shooting the ball much better overall, and his production off the bench has been a huge component for the team with the best record in the West this year. The next player thriving now that was given up on only for him to thrive on another team is Malik Beasley of the Minnesota Timberwolves. Beasley spent his first 3.5 years in the NBA on the Denver Nuggets, and after barely playing at all in his first 2 seasons with them, he started to emerge as a key contributor off the bench in his 3rd year. He was a natural scorer who could convert from all 3 levels, and he definitely showed flashes of someone who could be an impact player in a bigger role, but that improvement came at the same time as the emergence of the Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray duo, and the team started to win more games, and their focus was fully on the now and how they can get the most out of their guys in the present. So when Beasley started his 4th season off in a bit of a slump, the team moved him in a 4-team trade, essentially as a throw-in as part of the deal that saw players like Robert Covington and Clint Capella traded to new teams. Beasley was the furthest thing from the focus of that trade deal, but from the second he arrived in Minnesota with an opportunity to have a bigger role, he took that opportunity by the horns and has been making the absolute most of it. Since his arrival on the team, he's been scoring over 20 points per game, he's been efficient in doing so, shooting 46% from the field and 41% from 3, and that talent he was showing glimpses of on Denver's bench is now on full display every night as the Timberwolves' starting shooting guard. The next player we'll be discussing that was completely given up on only to thrive in his new home is TJ Warren of the Indiana Pacers. Warren's development started with the Phoenix Suns, and he's an example of a guy who put the work in and improved every single year. His development came at the same time as the Suns being at their lowest, however, and the fact that the team was one of the worst teams in the league in that span resulted in Warren himself becoming one of the more underrated players in the league. The team made some questionable moves at this time too, and one of the biggest ones was choosing to essentially give TJ Warren away. Yes, the Suns literally gave both TJ Warren and a second-round pick to the Indiana Pacers, and in return, all they got was cash considerations. No players, no picks, just some cash for a player who was scoring an efficient 20 points per game with them. Well, last season, Warren had the best year of his career, scoring 20 points per game and shooting both 54% from the field and 40% from three, making him one of the most effective scorers both inside and out, and he led the Pacers in scoring while helping lead them to a top 4 finish in the Eastern Conference standings last season. You just don't find players with that much talent available for so little on the market, and the fact that the Suns gave him away for so little is up there in contention for the worst trade orchestrated by a team in recent history. The next player that's thriving after being given up on previously is Terry Rozier of the Charlotte Hornets. Similar to Jordan Clarkson, Rozier is a guy who developed on a team that had their focus on winning like the Boston Celtics did when he was there, and his role off the bench was to ignite the second unit with a spark of scoring and shot creation. Rozier had some incredibly high highs on the Celtics, including his 2018 playoff run where he filled in for an injured Kyrie Irving, but he also had some low lows as well, and he too was incredibly streaky and inefficient, all things considered. He often played his best basketball when he was given a bigger role or when he was filling in for an injured player in the starting lineup and got to be in the starting lineup, though, and his talent was definitely there. So when it became apparent that Kyrie Irving was going to leave the team in free agency and the starting point guard spot would be open, he definitely could have and should have been an option to fill it. Instead, though, the Celtics opted to sign and trade him to the Hornets in exchange for then All-Star Kemba Walker, but in hindsight, this deal strongly favors the Hornets. Kemba is now the one that plays with streaky production, he's inconsistent, and he's getting paid a max contract, while Rozier is playing the best basketball of his life, scoring over 20 points per game this season on impressive shooting splits of 49% from the field and 44% from three, and he's getting paid much less than Kemba Walker is. Maybe he just needed a change of scenery to take that next step, but the Celtics would probably like a do-over with that deal now. And finally, the last player we'll be discussing today that was given up on way too early is an obvious choice for this list, being Zach Lavine of the Chicago Bulls. Lavine's rise started on the Minnesota Timberwolves, and his was almost entirely money-driven. The Timberwolves had a young trio of Karl Anthony Towns, Andrew Wiggins, and Zach Lavine at the time, and then Wiggins was still viewed as a player with potential and a key part of the team's core. They didn't want to have to pay all three of them, and Cat was the clear best player and face of the franchise, so unfortunately, they ruled in favor of keeping Wiggins around and paying him the big bucks instead of Lavine. They then created a trade package with Lavine as the most enticing piece that they sent to the Chicago Bulls in exchange for Jimmy Butler, which was a good move in theory because he did elevate them to playoff contention, but Jimmy grew tired quickly of the lackadaisical culture, and then he forced his way out a year later, which made that move disastrous in the end, as they were now back to the bottom of the Western Conference standings. Lavine, on the other hand, is an all-star. He's one of the leading scorers in the whole league right now, scoring 29 points per game, and his game has grown so much that the Wolves have to be asking themselves what if they kept him around and let him grow alongside Karl Anthony Towns. And with that being said, that's all I have for you today. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below what you think about the players discussed. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.